Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not a queen, a rebel, or a figure anyone will build a statue for. You're a noble woman, which in Renaissance Europe means you're exquisitely dressed, impeccably mannered, and almost entirely powerless. Your job is to be silent, graceful under scrutiny, and fertile on demand. You are the gold leaf margin of someone else's story, a decorative flourish, a useful bond between men who matter. You own silks, not decisions, influence, not control, a name but never the right to sign it freely. So before your corset tightens, your smile freezes, and another child is named after someone you hate. Do me a favour, leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what it says about you that you chose slow, elegant social suffocation as your bedtime story tonight. If you'd like early access, ad-free audio of these episodes, or just want to support the show, there's a Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back, be still. And remember, in the Renaissance, being born noble only guaranteed one thing, that your cage would be velvet. Let's begin. You're born into brocade and expectation, not into love, not exactly. Love is for poems and peasants. You're received into the world with a mix of relief and calculation. A daughter, yes, a healthy one at least, a soft bundle of future negotiations. A girl can be useful, if managed correctly, if she doesn't grow strange or speak too loudly, or take after the wrong aunt. For now, you are a pink, shrieking promise wrapped in linen. The nursemaid tuts approvingly at your lungs. Your mother exhales. The steward updates the estate ledger. The wheels begin to turn. You are not expected to understand your place in the world, but you will be taught to perform it before you can read. Your days are ordered by women who do not smile when they correct you. You learn to walk in a straight line, to hold your tongue when adults speak, and to keep your knees together even when no one is looking. You are praised for being quiet. You are punished for fidgeting. When you speak too boldly at table, your mother's hand rests gently, meaningfully over yours, and you know to stop. There are lessons you're formally taught, and then there are the ones you absorb like damp through stone. Bend, dim, adapt. Your education begins early and politely. A tutor teaches you to recite Latin phrases with the lilting cadence of someone who will never be asked to use them. You memorize scripture, etiquette, and bits of geography, enough to appear cultured, never enough to be threatening. You're not trained to lead, but to decorate. You learn to play the lute because it is charming, to embroider because it is calming, and to dance because it is expected. Nothing you study is meant to change the world. It is all designed to change how the world sees you. There is a distinct flavour to the pride adults take in your accomplishments. They are not proud of you, not exactly. They are proud of what you represent, a well-kept garden, pruned just right for future harvest. Your ability to play a flawless minuet is not delightful in itself. It is a signal, a flag to be waved during marriage negotiations. Your music, your manners, your French, all pieces in a long, tedious game you don't yet know you're playing. Every time you learn something new, someone older begins composing a letter in their head about your suitability. Your body begins to change before you're ready for it, and that is when the rules tighten. You grow taller. Your chest begins to hint at curves. Eyes linger longer than they used to. You start to understand that your body is watched, not with affection, but with expectation. The nurse pinches your cheeks in the morning so you look fresh for guests. Your mother advises you not to smile too widely. No one wants a girl who looks too eager, she says, applying a dab of rosewater to your wrists. You begin to watch yourself from the outside. You are no longer simply a child. You are a product in refinement. Your brothers are allowed to scrape knees and raise their voices. You are allowed to arrange flowers and apologize for existing too vividly. When they spill wine, it's shrugged off as high spirits. When you do it, it's clumsiness, a mark against your training. You are always being trained. Even the games you play are curated. Doll houses become practice estates. Imaginary husbands start to appear in your drawings. You're told this is natural, normal, sweet. You're not sure what it is, but you understand that questioning it is unwelcome. Every month you're weighed in stares and whispers. She's growing quickly, someone murmurs. She has her mother's figure, says another. You learn to blush on cue. You learn to nod and smile without revealing your teeth. You are measured by things you did not choose. The angle of your jaw, the clarity of your skin, the absence of blemish or complaint. Your worth is appraised constantly and quietly. A look here, a note there, an approving glance from a visiting uncle. You are a conversation topic disguised as a daughter. You know your first blood is coming, not because anyone tells you, but because the older girls look at you differently. One morning, it arrives and you feel your stomach turn, not with pain, but with knowledge. Something has shifted, something irreversible. The maid who washes your linen says nothing, but changes your bedding with a kind of reverent speed. Your mother hands you a small packet of folded cloth and says, "You're a woman now," as if that's a gift. You don't feel like a woman. You feel like a house has been locked from the outside, and you've just realised you live in it. After that, things quicken. The tutors begin adjusting their tone. The maids curtsy a bit lower. The letters your father receives begin to pile higher than before. You're asked to sit in on more dinners, wear more elaborate gowns, stand longer without fidgeting. No one tells you why, but you understand. You're becoming visible in a new way, not as a child, not quite as an adult, but as a commodity nearly ready for sale. Your name is spoken differently now, with care, with strategy, with ownership. You're not a girl anymore, but you're not yet a person. You're something in between. A portrait half finished, a poem with no author, a body with a price waiting to be paid. You are 13, perhaps 14, old enough to be useful, not yet old enough to be inconvenient. The phrase they use is of age, though it means different things to different people. To your mother, it means whispering instructions about bath oils and walking with smaller steps. To your nurse, it means tightening your bodice a notch and pinching your cheeks harder in the morning. To your father, it means writing letters. To men you've never met, it means value, your value, as measured in coin, land, alliances, and the bloodline you represent, like a parchment wrapped in ribbons. You're told very little of what's happening, but everything around you begins to change. You're summoned more often to sit in parlours where older men sip wine and speak in tones so polite they feel like threats. You're introduced, appraised, and then dismissed, sometimes with a smile, sometimes without. The priest visits more often now, and his sermons take a sharper turn toward obedience and duty. He looks at you too directly when he mentions purity. You stop meeting his gaze. It seems safer. You're taught to walk slower and to keep your eyes lowered, but not too lowered, to look interested, but not eager, to appear serene without seeming dim. This is the art of being chosen, to become the illusion of preference while being entirely predetermined. Your tutors emphasize the finer points of grammar and calligraphy with renewed urgency, not because you'll need them, but because someone else might be impressed. Your handwriting could sway a suitor's aunt. Your French pronunciation might charm a brother-in-law. Your voice must be gentle, your laugh moderate, your opinions invisible. Behind closed doors, the real work begins. The uncles arrive, the cousins, the family friends with too much influence and too little tact. They speak in code you're not supposed to understand, but of course you do. She's maturing well means you've grown breasts. The dowry is generous means you're already too expensive to refuse. They talk of estates, of titles, of inheritance law, all while sipping wine you're not allowed to taste. You sit in the next room with your embroidery and pretend not to hear the way they talk about your virginity, like it's a form of livestock certification. Your father tells you that you'll have some say. Your mother corrects him with a glance. What he means is that he will offer you a short list of suitors who meet the criteria, and you may indicate which one repulses you the least. That, apparently, is choice. You are permitted to veto the man with the laugh like breaking glass. You are not permitted to veto the one whose money comes from salted mines and a dead cousin. He has an estate, your father says, as if that explains the smell. The priest blesses every step of the process, of course. He tells you this is a holy union, that your obedience is a form of devotion, that your future husband will be your spiritual guide. He says this while adjusting his robes and avoiding your eyes. You nod and thank him. You've learned by now that protest sounds like sin when spoken in a woman's voice. Eventually, a match is made, or declared. The man who wins, if it's fair to call it winning, is older than you by 2 decades and possesses 3 things your family admires: wealth, bloodline, and no recent scandals. His portrait is sent ahead. He is not ugly, but he is not kind either, and you know which matters more. He writes you a letter that someone else probably dictated, full of admiration for your accomplishments and eagerness for your shared future. You write a reply under supervision. You are praised for your penmanship. As the date approaches, you're fitted for gowns, coached on how to stand beside him, how to tilt your head just enough to seem engaged but not assertive. You practice smiling in the mirror until it no longer resembles anything human. When guests arrive, you're displayed like a well-curated relic. The phrase, "a fine match," is whispered like a spell. You're told to be gracious. You're told to look happy. Your face aches from it. Your dowry is catalogued in detail: coin, cloth, property rights, a few minor artifacts from your grandmother's wedding trunk. But the real dowry is unspoken. It is your compliance, your silence, your ability to make other people comfortable with the arrangement. You are not bringing yourself to this marriage. You are bringing your lineage, your chastity, and your capacity to bear sons without fuss. Anything more is excessive. Anything less is failure. No one asks what you want. That's not cruelty. Not exactly. It's simply irrelevant. Your wants were never part of the calculation. You are an investment dressed in lace. You are the elegant bridge between 2 bloodlines that would otherwise never shake hands. You are not the bride. You are the arrangement. You smile. You curtsy. You are congratulated for things you didn't choose. And when you're finally alone in your room, looking out at the garden that will soon no longer be yours, you do not cry. That would be unbecoming. You sit, you breathe, you press your palms into the embroidered cushion beside you, and remind yourself that this is what success looks like, in your world anyway. The day arrives with bells, banners, and the overwhelming scent of lilies arranged by someone who doesn't know you're allergic. It is your wedding day, which is to say, it is your departure. A formal perfumed exile, dressed up in velvet and hymns. You are not being welcomed into a new family, so much as escorted out of your own. The house is full of people you've known since infancy, and not one of them asks if you're happy. That isn't the point. The point is that everything looks magnificent. You wake before dawn, not from excitement, but because sleep doesn't come easily when your future has been planned to the hour. Your maid begins the process of dressing you. A process that lasts nearly 3 hours, involves 4 women, and feels more like construction than preparation. Your shift is linen, your corset is boned, your gown is brocade, and your sleeves are detachable, but only with the assistance of someone else's hands. You do not breathe so much as you ration air between pins. Your hair is twisted, coiled, and stabbed with golden ornaments shaped like leaves. They catch the candlelight. They also catch in your scalp. You are decorated like an altar. That's what brides are in the end. Not women, but offerings. By mid-morning the guests arrive. They are dressed in silk and smugness. They greet your father like a man who has negotiated well, and your mother like a woman who knows her place. They greet you with careful admiration, as if speaking too loudly might break the illusion that you're here by choice. You nod and curtsy and smile until your face feels like it belongs to someone else. Your friends, those who haven't been married off yet, whisper behind their fans about your husband's lands, his temper, his rumoured mistress, his fertility. Mostly, his fertility. You hear your name paired with the phrase, strong sons, and do not flinch. That's the game. The groom arrives fashionably late, which is his right. He is escorted in with fanfare and masculine laughter, surrounded by men who speak of hunting and politics, while ignoring the fact that you, the centrepiece of this entire event, have never held a conversation with him longer than a greeting. He bows when he sees you. You curtsy, deeper than necessary. You've been instructed to appear modest. You wonder if he notices your hands trembling. You wonder if he cares. The ceremony is conducted with solemnity and a kind of performative reverence. The priest intones blessings that sound more contractual than sacred. You stand beside a man whose fingers brush yours only when the ritual demands it. When he slips the ring onto your finger, it is too tight. You do not ask for it to be adjusted. That's your first lesson as a wife. Discomfort is not grounds for interruption. You say your vows with a voice that does not shake, because you practiced last night with your pillow, mouthing the words until they no longer meant anything. After the ceremony comes the procession, a lavish public parade meant to display your union to the city and remind everyone that wealth and bloodline are alive and well. You are seated in a litter carried by men you do not know. Crowds cheer, throw petals, and wave as if you are returning from war rather than heading into a life you did not choose. Children cry out your name. One woman crosses herself as you pass. It feels less like a blessing than a warning. The feast is immense. Roasted peacock, sugared fruit, eels shaped into swans, and a centrepiece made of gilded bread. There is wine, and more wine, and carefully choreographed laughter. Speeches are given. Your father talks of honour. Your husband toasts your beauty. Your mother does not cry, though her eyes are rimmed with something that might have been emotion or might simply be fatigue. You smile, still smiling, always smiling. The food is lovely. You taste none of it. Your stomach is a closed fist. The entertainment begins with music, then dancing, then a brief, unsettling performance involving a costume jester making bawdy jokes about matrimony. Everyone laughs, you pretend to. No one seems to find it odd that the celebration of your new life feels indistinguishable from a farce. The mood is jubilant, you are exhausted, the hour grows late, the expectations grow heavier. Eventually, you are led away from the hall. Not alone, of course. You're escorted, delicately, ceremoniously, to the bridal chamber. This is not treated as a private moment. It is a final ritual, one last spectacle for the witnesses. Some noble families still observe the bedding ceremony, where relatives stay just long enough to prove you both made it to the same bed. Yours is slightly more modern. You are merely walked to the door, then left in silence. It creaks shut behind you with the finality of a tomb lid. Inside, your husband waits. He is polite, or impatient, or indifferent. It hardly matters. What happens next is not something you're prepared for, despite every whispered warning and half-translated prayer. You do not cry, you do not scream. You lie still and hope that stillness counts as dignity. In the morning, the blood-stained sheet will be displayed. The guests will be pleased. Your family will be relieved. The world will nod its approval. You will rise sore and silent and begin the life that was chosen for you. He is older, of course. They always are. Older, wealthier, more experienced in everything that matters: business, politics, pleasure, and silence. He is not unattractive, though that hardly matters. You did not marry a face. You married a position, a title, a carefully folded future. His beard is trimmed. His hands are soft in the way that comes from a lifetime of never doing anything unpleasant with them. His smile is rare and never quite reaches his eyes. He calls you "my dear," with the affection of someone addressing a valuable object that has recently been cleaned. Your husband is a man of taste. He knows which wines to serve with fish, which artists to patronise, which Latin authors to quote at dinner. He speaks with a confident rhythm, as if everything he says is already correct. He compliments your appearance in the same tone he uses to compliment the new tapestries in the hall, appreciative, but with the detachment of someone who knows he could always commission another. He enjoys beauty, but he does not dwell in it. He consumes it. And you now are part of that collection. He does not ask you questions, not real ones, not questions with answers that matter. He asks how you slept, what you wore to mass, whether the kitchen has solved the bread issue. He does not ask how you feel, what you think, what you fear. That would be unnecessary. Feelings are inconvenient, thoughts are unpredictable, fear is expected. Your job is to present an agreeable version of all three: pleasant, measured, containable. He admires your restraint more than your conversation. If you speak too much at dinner, he doesn't interrupt. He simply refills his cup and changes the subject. You learn to read his moods, like sailors read weather, not because you want to, but because not knowing is dangerous. There's a particular tilt to his brow when he's frustrated, a pause between sentences that signals he's deciding whether to correct you, the flick of a sleeve when he's already decided. He is not violent, he doesn't have to be. The rooms rearrange themselves around his preferences. The servants lower their eyes in his presence. You do too, though with more grace. He likes music, not when you play it, but when it fills the air in the background of his better moods. He tolerates your embroidery and praises your singing in the abstract. He occasionally brings you trinkets from his travels, a fan, a book of poetry, a carved comb you're never quite sure you're allowed to use. He appreciates the idea of generosity more than its practice. If he is kind, it is accidental. If he is cruel, it is dismissed as stress or business, or simply the way men are. You are expected to understand the difference. You are not expected to complain. The bedroom is not a place of intimacy, it is a schedule. Sometimes you're summoned with notice, other times without. Your maid brushes your hair, powders your face, selects the least fussy nightgown. You're instructed to look rested, even when you aren't. When he visits, it is usually late and briefly. He does not linger. He does not ask if you're cold. He does not always speak. It happens the way one completes a duty, with efficiency, detachment, and just enough performance to maintain civility. On the nights he doesn't visit, you do not sleep easily, though the bed is large and the sheets are fine. You lie there still, listening to the sounds of the household, footsteps in the corridor, the low rumble of voices downstairs, the wind tapping against the window panes, like a thought trying to escape. You are not lonely. That would imply the memory of company. You are simply alone, dressed in silk, bathed in silence, and alone. Your body is not your own. It belongs to the contract signed in gold ink and solemnity. It is a shared estate, open for seasonal use. When guests come, you are seated beside him, painted in his palette, composed, smiling, present. He introduces you with pride, but not familiarity. He does not touch your hand. He speaks for you. She enjoys poetry, he says, though you haven't read any since your wedding. She's taken to the household beautifully, though your days are filled with awkward instructions and half-ignored servants. When he praises you, it is like complimenting the acoustics of a new ballroom. He approves of what you represent. There are moments when you almost forget what it was like to hope for more, when he says something amusing, when he mentions a book you once loved, when he sits beside you and doesn't speak for a long, comfortable moment. But those moments dissolve quickly. They are not signs of change. They are weather, a warm wind, a clear sky, something nice that passes. You remind yourself that kindness in this context is not safety. It is an indulgence he might revoke. You are his wife. That is your title and your role. Whether he loves you is irrelevant. Whether you love him is impolite. You wear his name like a necklace that cannot be removed. And in public, you shine. In private, you fold yourself into the margins of his schedule. And when he doesn't come to you, when he stays in his study until dawn, or disappears on trips that last longer than planned, you do not ask questions. You simply wait, like a well-behaved room, for the door to open again. The house is enormous. That is the first thing you notice. Not just large, but cavernous. Ceilings too high, corridors too long. Doors so thick you can't hear someone knock until they're already inside. The marble floor in the entryway gleams like standing water, polished daily by a servant whose name you will never learn. Tapestries hang on every wall, their threads dulled by age, but still ostentatious in scale. A hunting scene here, a biblical parable there, stitched for no one in particular, seen by everyone who matters. This is not a home. It is a statement. You're escorted through the rooms on your first day as though you're being toured through your own confinement. The steward gestures at things you're expected to admire. Imported glass, gilded chairs, the piano your husband had shipped from Florence. Your bedroom is the size of a chapel, with a bed carved from walnut and draped in curtains so thick they trap not just light, but sound. The fireplace is already lit. Though you're not cold, everyone is trying very hard to appear generous. No one asks what you need. There are more people than you expected. Servants, cousins, retainers, tutors, secretaries, and a handful of lingering in-laws who refuse to die or relocate. They nod politely when you pass, bow just enough to remind you they outrank you in familiarity, if not in status. They watch, constantly. Some are loyal to your husband, some to his mother. A few are loyal only to the rhythm of gossip and self-preservation. You cannot tell which is which, so you smile at all of them. Your husband is often absent. When he is present, he drifts through the house with the confidence of someone born to its dimensions. He knows which floorboards creak. You do not. He speaks to the staff with minimal words and maximal clarity. You must do the opposite, phrasing every instruction with soft hedges and niceties, lest you be labelled cruel. When you ask for things, they are delivered slowly, with the subtle scepticism reserved for newcomers who haven't yet proven they understand the rules. You are not mistress of the house. You are its newest exhibit. Your mother-in-law visits often enough to maintain control, and rarely enough to feign disinterest. She compliments your dress while adjusting your collar. She notes how pale you look, and suggests more time outdoors despite the fact that women of your rank are not supposed to tan. She offers unsolicited advice about managing the household, phrased as gentle corrections to things you didn't know you were doing wrong. She calls you dear. She means it the way one means a limp handshake, obligated, practiced, faintly amused. The staff learn your schedule before you do. Breakfast is served in your rooms. You are encouraged to take it alone, which sounds like a kindness but quickly becomes a sentence. The silence stretches long between the clinking of silverware. You read scripture or embroidery patterns while you eat, though you retain little from either. The window gives you a view of the eastern garden. It looks beautiful and unreachable, like something painted onto glass. You consider asking for a walk. You decide not to. Each day becomes a page to fill. You try to find purpose. You oversee the kitchens, consult with the steward about accounts, review linen orders, draft seating arrangements for dinners you do not host. You write letters to your family, careful and ornate, filled with descriptions of meals and rooms and seasonal flowers. You never mention how heavy the silence is, or how often you feel the air shift when someone leaves the room too quickly. You close each letter with gratitude and affection, and you wonder if they believe you. The halls are full of portraits, ancestors with narrow eyes and rigid posture. painted to be intimidating centuries after death. You pass them each day on the way to the chapel, to the library, to the west parlour where no one ever sits. Their gazes seem to follow you. They remind you of your place. You are not here to fill the rooms. You are here to preserve them. There is a music room, but you rarely play. The sound echoes too much. There is a garden, but it's never empty. There is a library, but the books you want have been locked in cabinets you do not have the keys to. Everything around you is beautiful and not quite yours. You learn to inhabit the spaces without leaving marks. You adjust to the quiet footsteps of others, the half-closed doors, the carefully averted eyes. When guests arrive, you are summoned to appear. You sit beside your husband, smile at the appropriate moments, and offer charming phrases you've practiced in the mirror. You do not laugh too loudly. You do not eat too quickly. You are complimented on your grace. The compliments sting, not because they are false, but because they are so exact. You are performing perfectly. No one sees you at all. At night, you retreat to your room. You remove the jewellery, the layers of brocade, the carefully arranged hair. You sit at your writing desk with a letter half finished and stare at the ink until it dries in the nib. There is nothing to say that hasn't been said in code. You are safe. You are comfortable. You are alone. No one tells you what to do exactly. They simply wait for you to do it. From the day you arrive, you are expected to assume control of the household, not just symbolically, but in the daily, grinding, invisible way that makes things function. You are the centre of the wheel that must never appear to be turning. Meals must be planned. Firewood must be ordered. Accounts must be balanced. Beds must be aired. Candles stocked. Bread risen. Linens rotated. Curtains changed according to season. And wine supplies inventoried without anyone ever mentioning that any of this happens at all. The servants do not report to your husband. They report to you. Not directly, of course. That would be too simple. They report to your steward, who filters their needs through a system of courtesies and deflections, which eventually land on your lap with phrases like, "Milady, a decision must be made regarding the new larder shelving." You are expected to nod as if you've always known about the shelving, and the larder, and the 16 arguments among the staff that have been simmering for weeks beneath the surface of every breakfast tray. No one trains you for this. You're supposed to have absorbed it, somehow, through osmosis or maternal instinct or divine feminine grace. Your education taught you the difference between a sonnet and a psalm, but not how to calculate how many chickens must be slaughtered for a banquet of 20. You have no idea which baker the kitchen trusts, or whether the footman who handles deliveries is stealing pepper again. You only know that if the fish is late, or the wine is soured, or the goose is underdone at your husband's next dinner party, the expression on his face will land squarely in your stomach, like a stone. So you learn, quickly, quietly. You listen to the gossip of maids and scribble notes after every meeting with the steward. You memorise which suppliers are dependable, which cooks take offence easily, which laundress requires 2 days' notice for monogram napkins. You keep lists, so many lists, and even as you gain a sense of order, you never quite gain authority. If you speak too directly, you're called sharp. If you hesitate, you're called unsure. The best you can hope for is competent, but never respected, never admired. Feasts are the worst of it, not because they are difficult, though they are, but because they must appear effortless. Guests arrive expecting to be dazzled. The table must be symmetrical, the candles perfectly spaced, the flowers neither too fragrant nor too sparse. Your husband wants the food abundant but refined, the music lively but not vulgar, and the wine flowing but never sloppy. Your job is to coordinate this harmony behind the scenes, invisibly, so that when everything unfolds like a miniature courtly miracle, he can nod in satisfaction and take credit for owning such a well-run home. Your staff do the work, but your name is attached to every mistake. A chipped goblet, Why didn't you notice? A delay between courses. Why weren't you more involved in the kitchen? An ill-chosen wine pairing? Clearly your palate isn't what it should be. You smile and accept the criticism because to defend yourself is to seem defensive. And to seem defensive is to admit failure. The only acceptable emotion is composed accountability, preferably expressed while wearing pearls. Budgeting becomes another quiet agony. You're given access to the household accounts, but only some of them. You may manage the monthly expenses by candles, flour, spices, minor repairs, but not the estate's overall finances. Those remain in your husband's ledger, guarded by his steward. Reported in brief summaries, you are not invited to question. You are trusted with everything that can go wrong and none of what gives you leverage. It is like steering a ship with a map written in code and no rudder. On good days, things run smoothly. The meat is well roasted, the linens are clean, the staff is moderately civil, and your husband does not look displeased. On these days, you are rewarded with nothing, or rather, with the absence of punishment. The supper served in your room is warm, the glance across the table is neutral, and the steward says, "Well done," in a voice so flat you wonder if he's mocking you. You take these moments and fold them into the quiet corners of your mind, like pressed flowers. They do not bloom, but they do not wilt either. On bad days, everything tightens. Your maid misplaces a comb. The kitchen runs out of sugar. The fire in the guest room smokes. Your husband raises an eyebrow at you during dinner, and it feels like being dropped from a great height. The staff retreat into murmurs. The air thickens with blame, though no one names it out loud. You go to bed knowing you will wake early to prevent whatever it was from happening again, and no one will notice that you did. You become the quiet force that keeps everything moving, and no one will ever thank you for it. That's the job. You are not here to be praised. You are here to maintain, to balance, to ensure that the silver is polished, the wine is poured, and no one ever has to think about how any of it happens. You are the invisible machinery of grace, the soft presence behind the curtain. Your husband entertains guests. You make sure no one sees the mess behind the tapestry. And if you do it perfectly, no one will ever know you did anything at all. The first time it happens, you're told it is a blessing. Your husband receives the news with mild satisfaction, as though the estate has yielded good olives that year. Your mother-in-law sends a note that includes a prayer and a list of herbal teas. Your maid weeps with relief. You smile because that is what is expected. Behind your ribs, something grows, and with it, a fear that feels older than you are. No one explains much. They speak in soft euphemisms and hopeful generalities. The physician makes gestures at your abdomen and mutters about alignment and humours. The midwife nods and tells you to eat boiled parsnips and avoid loud music. The priest reminds you that motherhood is sacred and suffering is virtuous. You begin to understand that pain is not a possibility. It is part of the job description. The holiness comes after. The blood comes first. The changes are not subtle. Your body becomes strange to you, unfamiliar in its shape and rhythm. You move more slowly, not by choice, but because there is no other way. The tightness in your back, the heaviness in your hips, the nausea that arrives before the sun and stays until nightfall. Your clothes no longer fit, but that's not a concern. Your appearance matters less now than your function. You are no longer a decorative object. You are a chamber, a corridor, a necessary inconvenience. As the months pass, you disappear into your condition. You are excused from certain dinners, allowed to lie down more often, spoken to in a softer voice. Not out of compassion, but caution. You are not ill. You are valuable. Valuable things must be protected but never truly cared for. You are offered warm milk, pillows, and the occasional hand placed reverently on your stomach, as if your body were a reliquary and not a living, terrified thing. Your husband touches you differently now, less often, more distantly, as if acknowledging the presence of someone else already occupying your skin. When the time comes, it does not arrive gently. There is no soft transition. There is pain, sudden and absolute, tearing through you like an angry inheritance. The midwife is summoned. She arrives with her satchel of cloths, oils and rosary beads. The room fills with heat and prayers. You are laid on a bed that feels too wide. Your legs are lifted. Your screams are muffled with linen. You are not alone, but you are isolated, surrounded by women who have done this before and will do it again, each carrying their own collection of scars behind calm expressions. No one tells you how long it will last. No one tells you how much you will bleed. You lose track of time, of faces, of your own name. Pain folds over you in waves until you forget there was ever a world outside this room. You feel torn, broken, split apart by something that was once called a gift. And when the baby finally arrives, wet, wailing, impossibly small, your first thought is not joy, but relief that the tearing has stopped. For now, if it is a son, there is celebration. A loud, unrestrained joy that echoes through the hallways. Wine is poured, bells are rung, your husband beams, your in-laws embrace, and you are allowed to rest a little longer before being dressed and presented as a triumphant vessel. If it is a daughter, the reaction is kind but subdued. Polite nods, slightly forced smiles. Next time, someone says, already reshuffling the expectations. You're kissed on the forehead and encouraged to recover quickly. There is still work to be done. Recovery is slow and strangely invisible. You're expected to remain in bed for several days, which sounds restful, until you realize how often people will come to see you, to coo at the child, to comment on your colour, to ensure that you're still properly grateful. You are stitched, sore, swollen and smiling. Your breasts ache. Your abdomen feels hollow. You pretend to sleep when the visitors come, because pretending is easier than speaking. You bleed for days. No one mentions it unless it becomes excessive. Then it is your fault for sitting up too soon. The baby cries at odd hours, but you are not expected to respond. A wet nurse has been hired. She is capable and kind, which makes you feel both grateful and unnecessary. You're told to rest, to restore your strength, to prepare for the next one. You understand now that this will happen again, soon. Your body is no longer yours. It is a tool with a brief intermission between uses. You begin to mark time not by seasons or holidays, but by the absence of bleeding and the arrival of it again. Sometimes the baby does not live. Sometimes it arrives too early, or too small, or too silent. When that happens, the house grows very quiet. No bells, no visitors, just candles and whispered phrases about God's plan. You are not encouraged to grieve. You are encouraged to accept. The priest tells you it is a mercy. Your husband tells you not to worry. The staff say nothing. You lie in bed, arms empty, and wonder if it still counts as motherhood when there is no child to show for it. And sometimes you do not live. Or you nearly don't. Fever, blood loss, an infection the physician does not recognize until it is too late. You survive because the midwife was fast or the physician guessed correctly, or your body simply refused to die. You are called strong, brave, godly, as if endurance is the same as consent, as if surviving wasn't mostly luck. If you live, you will do it again, because that is what you are here for, not just to produce, but to survive the production, over and over, without complaint, with dignity, with grace, with a pain that will never be spoken of again, once the linens are changed and the cradle is filled. Motherhood arrives not as a transformation, but as a continuation. There is no threshold you cross into a new identity, no great unfolding of wisdom or joy. One day you are a woman with a swollen belly. The next you are a mother, or at least you're called one. But the role is not defined by what you feel. It is defined by what you provide. You are not here to raise a child. You are here to raise an heir. If it's a son, you are congratulated in earnest. The household breathes easier. The priest offers a blessing with extra emphasis. Your husband kisses your forehead with a kind of satisfied detachment, like a merchant whose shipment has arrived on time. The wet nurse takes over almost immediately, and the boy is lifted out of your arms before you've had the chance to memorize his face. His care is not your responsibility. His potential is. He is cleaned, swaddled, and passed into a system of tutors, mentors, and stewards that will prepare him for a future you are not meant to shape. If it's a daughter, the congratulations are polite, almost apologetic. You smile and thank them. You are still bleeding. You are already thinking of how to try again. The girl remains with you longer, but not for your sake. There is simply no urgency in preparing her for power. She will be dressed prettily, taught to curtsy, and eventually sent down the same path you walked, with slightly better manners and a slightly worse dowry. You love her. You try not to show it too much. Affection is a liability. You are warned not to indulge. A noble woman's children are not to be coddled. Kisses are for nurses. Lullabies are for servants. You are expected to express pride, not love, especially with your sons. If you weep over a fever, you are weak. If you worry aloud, you're foolish. What they value in you is composure. Even when your child's skin turns pale and his breathing grows shallow, you are told to remain calm. The midwife will handle it. You must not cause a scene. Sometimes the child recovers, sometimes he doesn't. If he dies, there is a process, a small funeral, a modest gathering of mourners, a fresh name added to the family Bible. You're given a day or two to lie in bed. Then you're expected at dinner. Your husband does not speak of it unless prompted. When he does, he uses words like unfortunate and tragic, as if the child were a barn that caught fire. You nod. You excuse yourself early. You return to your room and sit for hours without moving. The surviving children grow without you, in a sense. They are always near, but never truly yours. Sons are raised by men who will teach them to become something other than soft. Daughters are trained by women who view your presence as a reminder of what comes next. You are allowed visits, supervised lessons, brief interactions arranged for optics more than bonding. You hold their hands when no one is watching. You sing to them when they're feverish and pretend it's a prayer. You write letters to your son once he is old enough to be sent away for education. They are formal, full of platitudes and household updates. You inquire after his tutors, his health, his Latin. You do not ask if he misses you. That would be unseemly. His replies are polite, proofread by someone else, and filled with polite ambition. You keep them in a box beside your bed and reread them with the reverence of someone studying a stranger. The household continues to run. You continue to produce. More children come, with varying levels of success. A miscarriage in spring, a second son in winter, a daughter who doesn't speak for her first 3 years and then never stops. You learn the signs of illness early. The slack mouth, the eyes too bright or too dull. You know which herbs might help, which physicians are too proud to admit they're guessing. You pray because that is what is left to you, not because you believe it will change anything. You learn how to grieve without making noise. When one of your children dies, a daughter this time, after a long cough and a short silence, you're allowed 1 hour alone with her. After that, the nurse takes her away and the linen is changed. The room is freshened with lavender. You're expected to compose yourself before the evening meal. You do. Your hands tremble on the silver, but your voice does not. Your husband says very little. Someone compliments the roast. The conversation moves on. People tell you that you are a good mother. What they mean is that you are tidy in your grief, punctual with your duties, efficient in your suffering. You write thank you notes for the condolences. You visit the chapel. You wear black for the required number of weeks. Then you return to pastel gowns and polite conversation. You continue. That is what you do. You carry on quietly, as if nothing ever threatened to break you open. And still, you hope. You hope the next child will live, that your son will remember the sound of your voice, that your daughter will marry someone who doesn't confuse obedience with affection. You plant small things in the garden and pretend you're planting something else, something that will last, something that will love you back. You become a fixture in the social landscape long before anyone decides if they like you. You are not invited to gatherings so much as expected to appear, a silent ornament in someone else's triumph. Your presence is a confirmation that your household is stable, your marriage functional, your beauty intact. It is understood that you will show up in the right gown, say the right things, and leave no lasting impression beyond elegance. You attend balls like a statue that has been taught to move. Court life is a performance with no intermission. You glide through salons and drawing rooms, through banquets and musical recitals, offering carefully portioned pieces of yourself that have been rehearsed to death. You laugh when laughter is appropriate. You tilt your head when someone tells a story, eyes wide, smile soft. You say things like, "How delightful," and "indeed most curious," regardless of whether you found it delightful or curious. The goal is not authenticity. The goal is acceptability. You quickly learn that every word spoken at these gatherings is doing twice the work it seems to. A compliment is rarely just a compliment. What a bold colour on you means you've crossed a line. Your looking well means they expected you to look worse. What a charming idea means you should never do it again. Language here is a net, thrown wide and drawn in slowly, catching whatever weakness floats too close to the surface. If you fail to respond correctly, the ripple spreads before the candles burn low. Friendships, when they happen, are shallow by design. You may bond with another woman over a shared distaste for a soprano's voice, or the stiffness of a duchess's seating arrangement, but that bond evaporates the moment your interests diverge. If her cousin is angling for your husband's favour, she will smile and pass along a rumour about your physician. If you outshine her in a new gown, she will mention, ever so sweetly, that she heard your mother once fainted during Mass. Nothing is ever said directly. Everything is sharpened by implication. The rules of appearance are strict and ever-shifting. One season, pale gowns mean virtue. The next, they mean desperation. A headdress too high suggests arrogance. A necklace too modest suggests dwindling funds. You're expected to know which cut of sleeve is current, which shade of rose is too forward, and which fabrics are appropriate for mourning your husband's third cousin, twice removed. You are not allowed to look careless. You're not allowed to look competitive. You must always look effortlessly perfect. And perfection, of course, takes hours of deliberate, invisible effort. At formal dinners, no one eats. That is not an exaggeration. The food is displayed like edible sculpture, roasted birds reassembled to look alive, sugar towers shaped like mythological beasts, soups that shimmer but are barely touched. Everyone knows the rules. One or two polite bites, a murmured compliment to the host, and a discreet exchange of glances to confirm that no one else is actually enjoying themselves either. You chew slowly, sip rarely, and pray you don't stain your gloves on the lamb sauce you didn't want in the first place. You are not seated for your comfort. You are seated for strategy. Who is placed beside you, across from you, one chair down, and slightly to the left? All of it matters. A bishop to your right might mean your husband is courting ecclesiastical favour. A duke's sister across from you might mean you're being watched. Every conversation you have is heard by someone else. Every smile is noted. Every frown is remembered. If you excuse yourself early, it's a statement. If you stay too long, it's another. The music, when it comes, is beautiful. So beautiful, in fact, that it often becomes unbearable. You sit through endless lute performances, vocal solos, and trios composed by someone's son who is finding his voice. You clap, you nod, you admire the technique, and all the while, you feel your own silence thickening in your throat. You once loved music. Now it feels like a test you never asked to take. You do not react too strongly or too little. You must always be moved, but not transformed. You become an expert in navigating the distance between appearances and reality. You know which couples despise each other, but still dance flawlessly. You know which hostess wears lavender because she's mourning someone who isn't dead. You know which men are smiling because they're drunk, and which because they're watching you carefully. You know, without ever being told, that one misplaced word could sour a reputation. One careless look could unmake a year's worth of social labour. When you return home from these events, you are not exhausted in the way that requires sleep. You are hollowed out, used up. Your cheeks ache from holding the same expression for too long. Your feet throb from shoes chosen for elegance, not mercy. You peel off the gown, the jewellery, the performance, and sit at your vanity with your hands resting in your lap, unable to move for a full 10 minutes. You undress in silence. You wash your face without looking in the mirror. Sometimes you receive compliments the next day. You were so radiant last night, someone will say. So composed. You thank them. You smile. You wonder if they noticed the way your hand shook when you reached for your wine glass. You hope they didn't. You fear they did. And so you go again, the next week, the next feast, the next salon, because that is the cost of maintaining what little security you have. You do not stand out. You do not disappear. You remain perfectly visible, perfectly restrained, like a painted figure on a fine porcelain plate, admired, fragile, and never permitted to move. They say you are cultured, and they mean it as a compliment. It means you know which fork to use, how to identify a Flemish brushstroke, and when to sigh appreciatively during a sonnet recitation. It means you've been moulded into something graceful, tasteful, and vaguely impressive, without ever being allowed to hold authority over the things you admire. You are fluent in the language of refinement, but never permitted to speak for yourself in it. You are not a participant. You are proof that your husband can afford good tutors. Your days are filled with quiet accomplishments. You paint, though rarely anything original. You copy studies of flowers or saints, or mythological scenes, always within the accepted palette, always with the approved technique. No one wants your interpretation of a storm. They want a modest Madonna, delicately shaded with downcast eyes. You embroider, not for leisure, but for legacy. Coats of arms, religious iconography, decorative borders for cloth that will be displayed at feasts and funerals alike. Each stitch takes time. Each finished piece is admired, praised, forgotten. You play music, the lute mostly, though occasionally the virginals when you're allowed. You practice until your fingers ache, not because anyone is demanding it, but because you know what silence costs. The ability to play beautifully is not just a talent, it's a shield, a tool, a way to fill a room without having to speak. When guests visit, you're asked to perform something light, charming, feminine. You're praised for your touch, your tone, your poise. No one asks if the music means anything to you. That's not part of the performance. You are given books, mostly poetry, mostly by men. They write about love, longing, virtue, beauty. The women in these poems are always lovely and silent, or tragic and silent, or dead and even more silent. You try to enjoy them. You try to believe they're meant for you. But the more you read, the more you realise they were written for other men. Men writing to impress one another about how delicately they can imagine your restraint. You begin to notice how many of the poems end in disappearance. Discussions about art and literature take place around you, not with you. When your husband hosts philosophers or painters or visiting dignitaries, You're expected to contribute just enough to seem informed, but never so much that you sound invested. A well-placed quote, a thoughtful nod, a remark about how beautiful the fresco in the chapel has become since its recent restoration. You are part of the ambience, like the gilded candlesticks or the wine. Polished, present, quiet. You are encouraged to appreciate culture, to elevate your tastes, to refine your soul, but not to question, not to analyse. You are told that beauty uplifts, that art brings you closer to God, that music soothes the spirit, and yet you feel none of those things as they were promised, not anymore. You feel the cage under the velvet. You feel the dull edge of routine in every well-practiced trill. You stare at a painting for an hour and realise you've forgotten what you were looking at. There are times when you attempt something unsanctioned, a sketch not based on anything sacred, a line of verse that feels too direct, too modern, too much like something you might actually think. You hide it. Not because anyone would punish you, but because they wouldn't understand. Or worse, they would laugh, or nod indulgently. You fear that more than disapproval. Indulgence is the kind of mockery that doesn't need to raise its voice. Your needlework becomes your diary. You do not write words, that would be dangerous. But you choose thread colours that mean something only to you. You hide patterns inside floral borders, a crooked leaf here, a line that loops the wrong way there. Small acts of defiance sewn into servitude. No one notices. No one looks closely. They assume your artistry is decoration, never communication. You begin to forget what you enjoy, not because you've lost the ability, but because it's easier not to ask. Every preference becomes a question of propriety. Do you really love this composer, or have you simply heard his works more than any other? Do you like painting, or do you just fear the silence it fills? Do you enjoy this poem, or have you learned to enjoy being praised for enjoying it? The line between self and surface blurs. Your tastes begin to feel like a performance you can't stop giving, and through it all you're admired, endlessly, by guests, relatives, passing courtiers. She has such poise, they say, such refinement, as if those qualities are a substitute for identity, as if elegance is character. You nod, you smile, you thank them, you let the compliment settle over your skin like powder. It covers well, it does not nourish. You are the portrait come to life, still composed, bathed in soft light. You are the music drifting from behind a closed door. You are the thread that finishes someone else's banner. They call it culture. You have no name for it anymore. Just the quiet, creeping knowledge that you've spent years becoming easier to display. Religion is the one place you're told you fully belong, not as a person, but as a soul, which sounds comforting until you realise even your soul comes with expectations. You are taught from childhood that it is the only thing you truly possess. And yet, every prayer, every confession, every kneeling hour in the chapel reminds you that even this possession is under supervision. You are to surrender it, shape it, subdue it, until it matches what the church says it should be. You pray constantly, not because it brings you peace, but because it is what you've been taught to do with fear. You pray when your child coughs. You pray when your husband rides out in the rain. You pray before meals, after confession, during childbirth, and every time you bleed more than you should. The words come automatically now. You could recite them backwards. You wonder sometimes if God hears them, or if He too has learned to tune out the repetition. The chapel in your home is small but beautiful, gilt-trimmed, shadowed by stained glass, heavy with incense and dust. You kneel on cold stone, the hem of your gown dragging across the same grooves, carved by women who came before you. You do not look at them, but you know they are there. You feel them in the quiet, the ghosts of obedient wives, repentant daughters, childless sisters. They whisper through the candle smoke. They remind you that salvation is a narrow hallway, and you must walk it without complaint. Suffering is sacred, that is what they say. Pain purifies, sacrifice elevates. Your confessor tells you this gently, like a man delivering bad news with a soft voice and clean hands. When you speak of your exhaustion, he encourages gratitude. When you mention fear, he suggests more prayer. When you confess thoughts that frighten you, the fleeting resentment, the moments of numbness, he absolves you with practiced calm. He does not ask why you feel these things. He does not offer comfort. He simply reminds you that submission is holy and that endurance is evidence of God's love. You are not supposed to question. Faith is not a dialogue. It is a posture, a kneeling one. So you keep your doubts small and quiet, folded into the corners of your mind, like contraband. When your child is ill and the fever does not break, you tell yourself it is a test. When your husband forgets your name in a drunken haze, you call it your cross to bear. When you look at your own reflection and feel nothing, you recite the Lord's Prayer until the feeling passes. The rules for women are clear. Be pure, be modest, be silent, obey your husband, bear children, accept suffering, smile. Each of these is framed not as a social construct, but as divine will. To question them is to risk your soul. You do not want to risk your soul. It's the only thing you might still have to yourself. Unless that's another lie, just a prettier one, written in Latin and whispered over candles. You fast as instructed. You attend Mass without fail. You observe feast days and saints' days, and every obscure calendar marking that gives shape to your year. You make penance for sins that feel more like symptoms. You confess your jealousy, your laziness, your pride, even when they are the only things that have made you feel real in months. You are told this is humility. You try to believe it. There are moments when the ritual gives you something to hold on to, a line from scripture that feels true, a hymn that strikes the right chord, a flicker of stillness in the chapel when no one is looking and the air seems to breathe with you. You cling to these. You call them faith. You do not tell anyone how rare they are. You do not tell your confessor that sometimes, in the middle of prayer, your mind drifts to your own funeral and stays there too long. The Virgin Mary is everywhere, in paintings, in statues, in sermons, always graceful, always grieving, always silent. You are expected to emulate her. She suffered without complaint. She obeyed without question. She bore the Son of God and never once demanded anything in return. This is the highest model you're offered, a woman who gives everything and is thanked with incense. You light candles at her feet. You whisper your fears into her marble face. You know she cannot answer. You wonder sometimes if men hear the same gospel you do. Their sermons are full of justice, of honour, of righteous wrath. Yours are about meekness, about patience, about making yourself smaller so God can fit more easily inside you. You want to ask if he would still love you if you were loud, if you were angry, if you said no, but you do not ask. That would be pride, and pride for a woman is worse than heresy. So you keep praying for your husband's health, for your children's safety, for forgiveness, for things you didn't choose. You pray harder when you bleed. You pray harder when you stop. You pray that if God is watching, he sees how well you are doing, how still you are, how faithful. And in your most private moments, you pray that he isn't watching at all. You're expected to be lovely, always. It doesn't matter if you're tired. It doesn't matter if your stomach has turned against you, or your joints ache from the damp, or your lungs burn with every breath. You must be composed, radiant, presentable. There is no allowance for visible deterioration. You may be fading, but you must do it gracefully, in full makeup, with an apology ready in case anyone notices you've lost weight. Beauty is not just decoration, it is duty. It signifies control, prosperity, worth. A pale complexion means purity. Glossed lips mean youth. Clear eyes mean composure. Any deviation is interpreted not as illness, but as negligence. You cannot afford to look tired. You cannot afford to look real. So you begin the day with powders, rouges, scented oils, and herbal rinses. Your maid applies them in layers with practiced hands. You stare into the mirror and watch yourself vanish beneath the effort to look well. You're sick, but it's difficult to say with certainty from what. Illness is as common as dust. It comes and goes in cycles, the headaches, the dizziness, the sore throats that turn into something worse. You've stopped bothering to name the symptoms. No one believes them until you're too pale to ignore. Even then, they assume it's nerves, or poor humours, or punishment for eating too many figs. The physician visits and mutters a Latin phrase, which somehow justifies everything he doesn't understand. His treatments are predictable: bleeding, leeches, purging, poultices that smell like boiled rot. You lie on the bed while he cuts a neat incision in your forearm and drains what little strength you had left. He applies hot stones to your spine. He recommends boiled frog hearts, crushed pearls in wine, powdered coral mixed with stale milk. When that fails, he prescribes prayer. When that fails, silence. You nod. You submit. You have learned that resisting treatment only confirms your illness. Some remedies are more dangerous than the symptoms. The powdered lead you apply to your cheeks each morning gives your skin a ghostly perfection. It also makes your gums bleed. The mercury salves promise to clear your rashes, leave your fingers numb. Your hair thins, but that's to be expected. Everything thins eventually. You paint your eyebrows back in. You pinch your cheeks to simulate vitality. When guests arrive, they compliment your colour. You thank them and excuse yourself to lie down. Your husband notices, but only in passing. He comments on your fragility, as if it's a flattering trait. He advises you to take the sea air, though he makes no plans to take you there. He reminds you to eat more, while dismissing the food you manage to keep down. He does not sit with you when the fever spikes. He does not write to inquire when he's away. He tells others you are recovering, and then changes the subject. Your in-laws send tonics, saints' medallions, dried flowers from a monastery garden. You smile and say you're grateful. You are always grateful, even when you can't keep anything down, even when your skin burns from ointments that no one tested, even when you bleed for 12 days straight, and the physician suggests it's just your body releasing sorrow. You begin to wonder if the sorrow is the only part of you they've correctly diagnosed. You stop recognizing yourself in the mirror, not because you look unwell, the makeup still covers that, but because the person beneath it has become indistinct. You are not sure when your reflection stopped belonging to you. Somewhere between the first powdered lash and the most recent medicinal poultice, you disappeared behind the maintenance. You are a curated image of wellness with a decaying centre, a painted shell, pretending to hold weight. No one tells you to rest, they tell you to recover. There's a difference. Rest implies permission to stop. Recovery implies obligation to return. You're expected to rejoin the table, the salon, the chapel, to be seen. You are expected to reassure everyone that you're better, even if you aren't, especially if you aren't. Your presence must signal progress. Your face must remain smooth, unreadable, and lightly perfumed. You hear of other women, noble women like you, who waste away in locked rooms, never seen again, after a fever, or a miscarriage, or a poorly managed cough. Sometimes their names are mentioned at dinner, with a pause and a sip of wine. Such a shame, someone says. She had such delicate features. Their portraits remain. Their perfumes are passed down. Their chairs are not reassigned for a season, out of respect. You wonder if you will be one of them. You wonder if you already are. But until that moment comes, if it comes, you will rise, as you always do. You will sit while your maid applies powder over your hollow cheeks. You will wear silk sleeves to hide the bruises from the physician's tools. You will rehearse the smile that reassures everyone. You will say, "Yes, I'm feeling much improved." You will walk to the parlour, stand in the light just so, and let the room admire how well you've kept your beauty. And no one will see the cost. Middle age arrives without announcement. There's no single moment you can point to and say, "This is when I changed." But it happens, slowly, like candlelight retreating from the corners of a room. Your skin dulls, your hair thins. Your reflection softens in a way that feels like erosion rather than evolution. You are no longer the centerpiece of a feast or the quiet envy of another man's wife. You are not forgotten, not quite, just increasingly hard to place. People speak to you more softly now, not out of respect, but because they're already beginning to speak around you. You are too old to be desirable in the way young women are taught to be. Your value no longer rests in fresh beauty or the promise of sons, but you are not yet a dowager, not yet allowed to trade visibility for wisdom or influence. You exist in between, still required to attend dinners, and you still expected to smile, but no longer sought out unless someone needs an extra seat filled with quiet elegance. You wear darker colours now, not quite mourning, just enough to suggest a certain dignity that people can't be bothered to define. Your husband's attentions grow colder in a way that is too subtle to protest. He is not cruel, he is simply elsewhere. He travels more, spends longer hours with the steward, laughs too easily, with the younger women at court who still bother with flirtation. He does not stop inviting you to events, but his arm no longer waits for yours. You walk beside him like a shadow in silk. If you speak, he listens politely. If you fall silent, he does not notice. You learn to speak only when necessary. Your children have grown. They love you perhaps in the way one loves a trusted landmark, familiar, unchanging, occasionally useful. But they do not visit often. They are busy. They are building their own households, managing their own children, hosting their own feasts. Your sons write letters with courteous updates about harvests and tutors. Your daughters send small tokens, lace, perfumed paper, half-finished thoughts. You smile at their distance. You tell yourself this is what you raised them for, independence. You do not say the word lonely. It sounds too much like failure. You begin to speak more with your maid than anyone else. She is younger, but not by much. You share long silences in your dressing chamber. Occasionally, you say something strange. A memory, a fear, a passing thought you didn't mean to say aloud. She nods, sometimes replies, sometimes just continues brushing your hair. Her hands are gentler than they used to be, not because you're fragile, but because she knows there's no one else touching you with kindness. The chapel becomes your most reliable companion. You spend more time there than you used to, not out of deepening faith, but because it is one of the few places where your silence feels voluntary. You sit in the back pew. You bring your prayer book and open it to the middle, not because the page matters, but because the motion does. You begin writing in the margins, not prayers, thoughts, observations, lines of poetry you remember from youth, lists of things you no longer care about. The ink smudges easily on the old parchment. You do not mind. No one asks what you do with your time. They assume you're resting or managing the servants or composing letters to distant nieces. In truth, your days blur. The hours are long and indistinct. You sit by the window and watch the weather change. You rearrange your jewellery, though you rarely wear it. You pick up embroidery and put it down again. You listen to footsteps in the corridor and try to guess who they belong to. You are not idle, you are simply unnecessary. Occasionally, someone compliments your grace, an old friend of your husband's, a younger woman at court, a visiting priest. You carry yourself so well, they say. Such composure. You smile. You thank them. You wonder if they mean you've aged without complaint, or if they simply admire how little space you take up. You do not ask. You already know the answer. There is no formal ceremony for women like you, no ritual that says she has done enough. She may rest. You keep performing. You attend the dinners, offer condolences, comment on the quality of the wine. You are always appropriate, always correct. No one mentions that your dresses are last season. No one notices that your jewellery hasn't changed. You are no longer being watched closely, which is its own kind of grief. You sometimes imagine what it would be like to vanish, not dramatically, just quietly, to take a long ride into the hills and not come back, to disappear into a convent or a cottage or a city where no one knows your family name. But you don't leave. You wouldn't know what to do with the space. You have lived your entire life within roles. Without them, there would be only air. And so you remain, present, pleasant, efficient. You are not yet allowed to fade, but you are no longer meant to shine. You exist like dust in a sunbeam, still beautiful in the right light, still suspended, still elegant, and still waiting for permission to settle. When it is nearly over, not life exactly, but relevance, people begin to speak of your legacy. They mean it kindly. It's meant to be a comfort, this idea that your life had shape, meaning, record. You nod and thank them. You do not say what you're thinking, which is that legacy is a word for what others do with the scraps of you that are left behind. It is not yours. It never was. You are remembered in fragments, in formal ink on brittle paper, in stitched initials on altar cloths, in the curl of your hair as painted by someone who barely looked at your face. You are recorded by your connections, daughter of, wife of, mother to. You exist in footnotes and family trees, reduced to a linking phrase between two men with more titles. Your story is not written, it is inferred. A silhouette traced around absences. Your name appears on ledgers, on dowry agreements, on the margins of letters your husband wrote to more important people. When your son gains favour at court, someone mentions you briefly. A woman of refinement, they say, or from a good family. No one remembers the colour of your eyes or the tune you used to hum when you thought no one was listening. Your presence becomes anecdotal, decorative, a minor proof that things were done properly once. There is a tapestry somewhere, in the great hall or the guest parlour, or perhaps rolled up in a storage chest no one has opened in years. It bears your name, embroidered in gold thread, just beneath a family crest. The thread has dulled, and the lettering is slightly crooked. One of the vowels is missing, or doubled. You're not sure. It doesn't matter. People will assume it was correct, or that it was meant to be. Your portrait hangs in a hallway no one uses anymore. A large, oil-heavy thing, painted in your youth, before the illnesses, before the griefs, had settled in your bones. You're dressed in a gown you barely remember wearing. Your expression is careful, composed, ever so slightly unreadable. Guests who pass by, if any do, might pause for a moment, glance at the plaque, and move on. She was lovely, they might say, as if loveliness is legacy. What you leave behind is not tangible. It is not yours to control. You raised children, some of whom will speak of you with fondness, others with polite vagueness. You kept a house running that your husband took credit for. You stitched banners and arranged banquets and comforted crying infants in the dark. You bore pain with dignity. You accepted joy in moderation. You did everything expected of you, and then some. And still, the record will be brief. There will be a tomb eventually, a stone slab, or perhaps a carved effigy in a family chapel, depending on your husband's priorities at the time of your death. You will not choose the inscription. It will speak of piety, obedience, and service. It will mention your husband's name first, then your children's. Yours will come last, like a closing phrase in a sentence already too long. No one will visit it after the first generation is gone. It will gather dust, moss, lichen, until even the words begin to fade. Sometimes someone will mention you in passing. A granddaughter with your middle name, a historian leafing through records, a servant remembering your voice. But even these echoes will thin over time. Memory does not last in houses like this. It is repainted, reupholstered, inherited by people who rearrange the furniture and hang new portraits. They will say your name when they read it, then say it less, then stop. And yet, you will have done your duty. That is the phrase they will use most often. She did her duty. It will be said with admiration, as if duty is a crown. But you know what it really was, a series of unchosen tasks endured with grace. Your success is measured by how little of yourself remains visible, by how little trouble you caused, how seamless your contributions were. You were not meant to be remembered for yourself. You were meant to leave no questions unanswered, no debts unpaid, no edges sharp enough to cut the people who came after you. There is no statue, no plaque that lists your favourite flower, the book you hid behind your psalter, the name of the servant who made you laugh when you thought laughter had left you forever. No one writes those things down. They are not legacy. They are just life. The kind of life that disappears quietly behind brocade and ceremony. And still you hope. Not for fame, not for monuments, but for some small remnant to survive. A letter never sent, folded into a prayer book. A ribbon tucked into a drawer that no one throws away. A piece of embroidery with a flaw so deliberate someone might notice, centuries from now, and wonder why. You were beautiful, you were obedient, you were forgotten politely. And that, for women like you, is often the best the world allows. You did everything right. That's the part no one can deny. You followed the rules. You curtsied when expected. You bore what you were told to bear. You smiled when it was safest. You kept your voice measured, your figure acceptable, your opinions folded neatly into silence. You did not scandalize. You did not rebel. You learned how to disappear into the role with elegance. And for that, they will say you lived well. But it was never yours. Not really. Not your childhood, dictated by lessons in docility. Not your marriage, selected like a strategic chess move. Not your household, which you ran without authority. Not your body, which was borrowed repeatedly for the purposes of lineage. Even your soul was managed on your behalf, confessed, advised, and corrected until it no longer startled at its own reflection. You lived in rooms you didn't choose, in gowns sewn by other hands, with futures plotted in other people's ink. You will not be remembered as someone who changed things. You were not meant to. You were not raised for impact, only for continuity, to carry forward names and fabrics and mannerisms that had already outlived their usefulness but still needed to appear graceful while doing so. Your life was never about who you were. It was about what you preserved, what you managed not to disrupt, what you upheld quietly, until someone else took over the chair you warmed. And yet, you were here. That matters, even if no one says it. You occupied space, even if that space was ornamental. You watched seasons change from behind lattice windows. You tasted honey on your tongue after months of illness and almost cried from the sweetness. You knew the names of every servant in your wing, even when they thought you hadn't noticed. You buried children. You birthed hope and wore it like a brooch you couldn't take off, even when it became too heavy. You knelt on cold stone and prayed with a conviction that outlived certainty. You wrote things in the margins of books. You hummed songs your mother taught you while brushing your hair alone at night. You once laughed so hard at a joke from your maid that you startled a visiting bishop. You were kind to animals. You held your daughters when no one else would. You bled in silence. You comforted without being comforted. You endured not because it was glorious, but because there was no other option, and you chose to make that endurance as gentle as it could be for those around you. There is no applause at the end of this story, just a soft closing of doors, a room left tidy, a name passed down to someone who will never ask where it came from. You are not tragic. You are not legendary. You are what happens to most people, a life that doesn't quite belong to them, shaped by the currents they were born into and carried forward by sheer effort and small graces. And yet, in some quiet place beyond this script, beyond the roles, beyond the embroidered borders of expectation, you still exist. not as a name in a registry or a face in a portrait, but as something more elemental, a pulse, a presence, the weight of someone who lived inside a system built to ignore her and still found small ways to speak. You whispered into the gaps, you carved space out of silence, you endured. The world won't remember you clearly, but you lived a life, not a grand one, not a free one, but one with texture, with weather, with motion, with moments that, though brief, belong to you completely. A burst of laughter, a warm morning in the garden, the sound of your child's breath in sleep, the private rebellion of a skipped prayer or a hidden poem. You lived inside a cage, but you noticed the sky through the bars. You noticed it every time. Now finally you're allowed to stop. There is no more proving, no more performance, no more posturing for a world that only noticed your usefulness. The gowns are folded, the halls have quieted, the ink has dried. You're no longer responsible for anyone's comfort. You do not need to smile anymore. You can rest your hands, rest your breath, rest the parts of yourself. You spent a lifetime tucking away, so neatly they nearly vanished. You were seen, you were shaped, you were silenced, and now at last you are free of all of it. You are here, briefly, elegantly, invisibly. That brings us to the end of tonight's story. Not a tale of rebellion or triumph, but of stillness carried through a lifetime. If you're still awake, thank you for bearing witness to a life that was never truly hers to claim. The noble women, the obedient ones, the beautifully forgotten, they weren't written into legend, but they existed quietly, with grace no one remembered to praise. If you'd like early access to more stories like this, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. You can also like, subscribe, or leave a comment sharing which forgotten world you'd like to drift through next. Sleep well.